Let's talk about the best ways to build your fantasy team, the best roster construction, and from different spots in your draft. Today, we'll tell you 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, 10 through 12. If you have a pick in any of those spots, what's the best way to go about constructing your roster? I am Adam Aizer. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Going to say hello to my two co-hosts here. Hello, Heath Cummings. Are you excited about James Cook and that extension he just signed?
It's the most wonderful time of the year. I just wake up every morning excited. I'm happy James Cook got his check, and we don't have to have that annoyance in doing the rankings.
It does help provide a little bit of clarity, certainly, and we can move him into the third round. For most people, he'll settle into that third round range. Hello, Jamey Eisenberg. Ramondre Stevenson has an injury. We don't know all that much about it right now, but have you posted the Travion Henderson rocket ship emoji tweet yet?
Several times. It's hard not to get excited about him, and he's probably faster than the rocket ship emoji based on what we saw. So there's a lot to love about where Travion is right now, and potentially could be if this Ramondre Stevenson injury is something we have to worry about. So Travion may move back ahead of James Cook if Stevenson's going to miss any extended period of time.
Heath, I can't. You can't hear him either, right?
Not at all.
Heath,
not at all.
Like, based on his face, it seemed like what he said was pretty funny, pretty clever. Yeah. So right now, can't hear Jamey at the current moment right now. We'll work on that. All right. So Heath, what we're going to do today is look at the teams, the roster builds from a draft that Jamey was a part of last night. It was one of our St. Jude drafts. And thanks to everybody who's contributed to our draft-a-thon. So we're going to look at the results, but let's take a look at, if you're drafting early, the best way to construct your roster. Now, this league was a 12-team league. It was full PPR, where you start one quarterback, one tight end, two running backs, two wide receivers, one flex. So a little bit shallower, only one flex, only two wide receivers. But if we can take a look at the first three teams, and Jamey was one of them. Jamey was team 3. They started out with Jamar Chase to team 1, Bijan Robinson to team 2, and CeeDee Lamb to team 3. And just there we go. We take a look there. Heath, your thoughts on just the first 3 picks, and if they look pretty normal to you in a PPR league with only two wide receivers, one flex.
Yeah. I mean, Chase, Bijan, Lamb are the first 3 picks for me in a full PPR format. That's the exact order I would take them in. Those are the exact 3 players I would take them in. Things get very wonky in round 2, but I will say those first 3 players that were taken. The thing about it, especially when you're picking with one of the first 3 picks, and the reason I moved CeeDee Lamb up to 3 ahead of any of the other running backs, is I think what you see here in round 2 with no wide receivers being taken, that's kind of how I feel about that range. Now, I wouldn't normally take a quarterback in round 2, but I often take Trey McBride in that spot in round 2. And so if I'm not going to take a wide receiver at the end of round 1, end of round 2, I'd really like to get one of my first 3 picks.
Okay, so Jamey, can you give me a hello? Let me see if we can hear you now.
Hi, Adam.
Cannot hear Jamey yet. Okay, so Heath and I will try to handle this until we get Jamey's microphone going here. So Trey McBride was already off the board when those second-round picks were being made. Bowers went in the middle of round 1. He went with the 7th pick of round 2. Trey McBride went with the 8th or 9th pick of round 2. So those last 3 picks, Irving, Josh Allen, Jonathan Taylor, and Allen was the first quarterback off the board. As we look at these 3 teams, none of them took a tight end early because McBride and Bowers were off the board, and maybe it was a little bit too early for Kittle, although he went with the 5th pick of round 3, which is a little earlier than what we usually see. When you look at, let's say, the first 3 picks for these 3 teams, do you like any of these builds better than the other 2?
So I think of these 3 builds, by far my favorite would be Chase, Taylor, and Kyren Williams. And I should say, like, that what I said about the quarterback and not wanting to take one with the first 3 picks, what that means, and you can see kind of what happened here, is you're probably waiting on quarterback. Because if you don't take one at the start of round 3, in those first 3 picks, there's a good chance the top 5 quarterbacks are gone by the time you pick in round 4, and there's not really anybody you want to take at the 4 or 5 turn. So I think the fact that only one team took a quarterback, and they did in the second round, kind of makes sense from this place. But if you already have that elite wide receiver in Jamar Chase, I'm perfectly fine, especially if Trey McBride is gone, with doubling up on running backs. I think there's a good chance that this team has the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy and 2 top 12 running backs.
Hi, Jamey.
Hi, buddy.
Here, you sound great. All right, so you took CeeDee Lamb, and then you took Bucky Irving, and then you took Tyreek Hill. So I guess I'll ask you the same question I asked Heath. Just looking at the first 3 rounds, is there a team that stands out for a good or a bad reason with teams 1 through 3?
I mean, obviously, it's hard to argue with any of the builds if you're going to go with a quarterback as one of your first 3 picks. I just would not do that. So team 2 is not the route that I would prefer to go. I would like that much better if that was Bijan Robinson, T. Higgins in round 2, and then maybe either Tyreek Hill in round 3 or just going 2 running backs with your first 3 picks. But I like, obviously, what I did. I was thrilled to get Bucky Irving at the back end of round 2. Obviously would have considered Jonathan Taylor as well if he was there, or Kyron Williams. And then Tyreek Hill is somebody that's a little bit polarizing. You can put JSN in that spot if you don't like Hill or Devontae Adams. So if you want to just play the position as opposed to the player, to get 2 top 12-ish caliber wide receivers and a top 10 caliber running back, I love that start the most. So that's my preferred build of the 3.
Yeah, and if we just now look at the first 7 picks and the way these rosters were built, 1 quarterback to team 2, a tight end in round 7 to team 1. Jamey takes 3 running backs and 4 wide receivers, which was an interesting strategy since you can only start 3 wide receivers. But Jamey, that's like kind of what Heath was saying. You didn't get a top 5 quarterback because you weren't going to take one in round 2 or 3, and Burrow and Hurts did not fall to you in round 4. You didn't get Kittle, so he didn't fall to you in round 4. In fact, he went just after your pick in round 3. But anyway, I know you like this roster build, but you just build out your running backs and your wide receivers, and then you take a quarterback late. In this league, you took Justin Fields as your only quarterback. TJ Hawkinson was your 8th round pick. So I know you liked this team, and drafting early, I think you're going to advocate, not say this is necessarily how you have to do it, but you like a team that really focuses on running back and wide receiver early if you have one of the first 3 picks in the draft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've seen most of our drafts. Now, again, it's not reflective of average draft position, where there is a chance you can get Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts coming back to you at the back end of round 4. It's just rare, but it does happen. And in the case of this draft, so it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in round 6, I was considering Sam Laporta. I think he went 1 or 2 picks before me, where I took Jerry Jeudy. So it was looking at some different options of how the draft may have fallen. But then I think you play the other side of that. To me, Garrett Wilson in round 4, where I got him, is a steal. To get Chuba Hubbard in round 5, you can make a case that's a steal. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is probably appropriately priced, but that's a very good pick, especially if Joe Flacco is going to start the majority of games. Really, of the players that we're showing here, the one where I may have reached on is Jalen Warren. I know we were debating at that point, because you and I were talking it out. Tyrone Tracy versus Jalen Warren, and even Caleb Johnson versus Jalen Warren. For me, at that point, it's more of a luxury pick, and I know you don't necessarily want to say that when you're talking about a round 7 selection, but if he's the starting running back for the Steelers, now I have another guy to sort of factor in with Hubbard and could potentially be a flex as well. So, yes, to your point, I do like to build out my running back and wide receiver depth. I don't think you have to reach for a quarterback or tight end. And the way that it played out to get Justin Fields and TJ Hawkinson, I'm pretty thrilled with that.
So I think we can take a look at all of these teams individually and the entire roster if we have that, and we can just sort of evaluate how these managers did. So this is team 1, Heath, with Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams. This is in order of how they picked. So they're going to be starting Kyler Murray, and they're going to be starting Taylor and Kyron. Jamar Chase, Marvin Harrison, and DK Metcalf would be the flex. Do they have good enough running back depth with Jordan Mason, Braylon Allen, and Samaje Perine? And then they've got Kelsey and Ertz. Looks good. What do you think about this team?
Yeah, I think this might be the difference between a 2 wide receiver and a 3 wide receiver league, is that I might have taken one more running back where they took Jaden Higgins, and I would have taken a different running back besides Samaje Perine. But I also think it shows that no quarterbacks, no tight ends in the first 6 picks for this team. They still have Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz. That's a very good combo, even if they're 117 years old combined. And then they have Kyler Murray at quarterback, which is a high upside starting quarterback in the 9th round. So I do think, looking at where this worked out, we like Jordan Mason a lot as kind of a bye-week replacement running back for as long as Aaron Jones is healthy, and maybe a must-start running back if Aaron Jones gets hurt. And Braylon Allen is moving up draft board just about as fast as anybody. So I do think they do have enough running back depth.
Okay. Jamey, let's get your thoughts on Team 2, and then we're going to get Heath's thoughts on Team 3, which is Jamey's. Team 2 started with Bijan Robinson, and then Josh Allen, T. Higgins, R.J. Harvey at 4'11", and then DeAndre Swift. One of the things you'll notice in this draft as we continue the show is that running backs went pretty early as a reaction, I think, to preseason week 1, especially Harvey and Henderson. But, yeah, what do you think about this team that's going to be rolling out Josh Allen at quarterback, Kyle Pitts and or Jake Ferguson at tight end, and at running back, it's Bijan Robinson, R.J. Harvey. Wide receiver, it's T. Higgins, Rome Odunze, or Matthew Golden. And then the flex is Swift, probably, or Golden or Odunze, I guess. And then there's Addison after week 3. Your thoughts on Team 2?
I think the running backs are great. Whenever you have Bijan Robinson and then whatever you pair with him, in this case, it's R.J. Harvey and DeAndre Swift. That's 3 top 20 caliber running backs. And whatever is going to happen in Jacksonville, round 9 is a great spot to get Tank Bigsby. So the 4 running backs at the top of the group here, or the 4 top running backs on this team, I think are pretty impressive. The quarterback is obviously a stud in Josh Allen, and I think the tight end will be okay, just in terms of, getting something out of Jake Ferguson, probably more so than Kyle Pitts, but you waited on the position, so, it's not bad there. It's really about the wide receiver spot for this team, so T. Higgins locked in, fine, that's great. The Odunze, Golden, Addison problem, at least until Addison is probably ready to go, could be a major issue because who knows what Odunze is going to do. And I do like the fact that there's a little friendship strategy going on here with Odunze and Luther Burden. So maybe one of those guys is, startable in a 2-receiver league or flex. But I think that's just a little bit of a concern there. So by taking the quarterback early and then prioritizing running back as much as they did with the 3 in the first 5 rounds, you're obviously leaving yourself a little thin at that position if you're concerned about it. So hopefully it does work out. I do think, though, the Addison value was great. The Bigsby value was great. I do like the Luther Burden pick as well. But there's just a lot of ifs at that second receiver spot, and especially knowing that T. Higgins has an injury track record. If he misses any time, especially during the Addison suspension, you could be really in trouble at the wide receiver spot.
He's going to get your thoughts real quick. 30 seconds on Jamey's team, Team 3, which started with CeeDee Lamb, and then Bucky Irving, Tyreek Hill, etc. here, starting at quarterback, Justin Fields, tight end, T.J. Hawkinson. And your thoughts on Jamey's team?
I'll just say that, when we evaluate each other's teams, we like to give each other a hard time sometimes. It seems pretty obvious that Jamey was the professional here because this is a fantastic team. He's got great value all the way through. Chris Godwin in the 9th is great. T.J. Hawkinson, I like that value at the end of round 8 as your starting tight end. Justin Fields, I said earlier that I would draft in round 7, I think, last week. So obviously I love that. Trey Benson's a fantastic backup running back. And I like Chuba Hubbard in round 4. So round 5 is fantastic there. It looks like if there's any criticism at all at the top of this draft, it's somebody who's used to drafting in a lot of 3 wide receiver leagues that drafted in a 2 wide receiver league. Like there's a lot of wide receivers at the top and maybe sacrifice some upside at other positions, but I love the team.
Well, thank you, Heath.
Garrett Wilson. Yeah, great job. Garrett Wilson going 46th was also kind of surprising, the latest I've seen him go. All right, that's how to pick from the first 3 spots. It's very, very okay and perhaps even recommended to wait on quarterback and tight end unless there's really good value there. Just build out your running backs and your wide receivers. Let's find out about picks 4 through 6, how to build from those spots when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Now we are back here on Fantasy Football Today. We're talking about how to draft in a 12-team PPR league from picks 4 through 6. We just talked about 1 through 3, not necessarily where you're going to get a quarterback or a tight end, unless you want to spend an early pick on a quarterback there. And hopefully Trey McBride makes it to you. He did not in this particular draft. But we get to picks 4 through 6 in this 12-team full PPR league where, again, you start 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. Jamey, just generally speaking, what changes from picks 4 through 6 compared to 1 through 3?
Well, I think in the case of this draft, it was the running backs getting pushed up as much as they did. But, really, After the first 2 picks, we could see anything between 3 and 12 happen. You know, there's clearly the 2 top receivers of CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, which you've yet to see so far. He was not drafted in the first 3 picks. He was not drafted in the first 6 picks. So he fell a little bit here. That group of receivers that typically comes after those top 3, they can get pushed up in some drafts. You know, the Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, Puka Nacua group, or they can fall like they did in this draft. But I think really what you're going to see is some combination of those most likely Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley running backs, and anything from those receivers behind Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. They're all in play in this particular spot.
And Heath, we see each team took a tight end in the first 6 rounds. 2 of the 3 teams took a tight end in the first 3 rounds, a little bit earlier than ADP for McBride. And 2 of the 3 teams took an elite quarterback here. Lamar Jackson going at 3.4, Jaden Daniels at 3.6. And then all 3 of these teams have a quarterback and a tight end by the 7th round. So very different than what we saw from teams 1 through 3. But if you want to get into it, and let's talk about the build for Team 4. Gibbs and St. Brown. Oh, no, nope, wrong. Gibbs and A.J. Brown. Gibbs, A.J. Brown, Lamar Jackson. James Conner at 409 was a little earlier than I expected. Devontae Smith, Sam Laporta, Cooper Kupp, etc. Your thoughts on this team?
So I think this team really, and when you look at all 3 teams together, you can really see it because this team got a gift with A.J. Brown at 209. We talk quite a bit about wanting to have one of those top 10 or 11 wide receivers, and 2 teams in the 4 through 6 range passed on that. This team got that. So they've got an elite running back, they've got an elite wide receiver, they've got an elite quarterback. And so that's a good start. I think you're right that looking past that, there may have been a few reaches in the 4 through 6 range. And I'm not a huge fan of the bench, but that can be overcome when you've got elite players at 3 of the 4 positions. And this team got that because a couple of other guys passed on A.J. Brown.
I think it's interesting, though, guys, that they took A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith because that hasn't exactly worked out perfectly the last couple of years. You know, usually one benefits a lot when the other is missing, which has happened from time to time. It's not bad, and I think, again, when you look at the value of these guys, like, you know, Devontae Smith, some people like him in the 4th round, so 5th round is probably appropriate for him, but it just felt like that's not the combination of wide receivers you want to pair up, just based on how they've operated, especially if they're going to still be as run-dominant as they were. I think they're going to throw the ball a little bit more, so I don't hate it, but I just don't love pairing up those 2 wide receivers in particular.
Well, another thing I want to talk about here is how to pivot when one position is being pushed up more than you expected. So this was the first draft that we did since preseason week 1, which saw R.J. Harvey look good and saw Travion Henderson look amazing. And Najee Harris did not play in week 1. We didn't know he was back. Maybe we knew he was back at practice at this point. But my point is, Hampton goes 37th. Travion Henderson goes 39th. R.J. Harvey was still on the board when Team 4 took James Conner. But there really were not – the running backs that we're used to seeing in round 5 just weren't there. So he decided that Team 4 decided, all right, look, I'm going to take James Conner here. Maybe he's usually a round 5 pick. Alvin Kamara was off the board. Sometimes he's available here. So that does happen where you have to reach maybe a little bit. But Chuba Hubbard was on the board. R.J. Harvey was there. Maybe you guys would have preferred that to James Conner. Either way, that's Team 4. And let's take a look at Team 5 now, which started with Devon Achane and Chase Brown. So this is a team that went without a wide receiver until round 4. So, Jamey, how did this team do at wide receiver? Because they're great at running back with Achane and Brown. We love George Kittle. Quarterback's Baker Mayfield. No issues there. I mean, you want to quibble about having him in round 7 or whatever, but how did this team do at wide receiver with this build going rounds 4, 5, 6, Worthy, Hunter, Waddle?
I think they did okay. You know, when you look at it, you got your 2 running backs in place. You have your tight end in place. Waited a little bit on quarterback, so dumping into wherever Baker Mayfield was picked in about the same range that he's going average averages. So whether you like that or not, but obviously you got a guy that has a chance to be special based on what we saw last year. And I think the receivers are okay. Worthy's going to swing this potentially one way or the other. If it's a 3-game suspension for Rashee Rice, then Worthy's not exactly the most ideal number 1 receiver. If it's a 6-game suspension for Rice, then Worthy, Hunter, and Waddle, it's a great combination. When the hope would be is you don't need to play all 3. You might have to play all 3 as a flex option, but you do have Javonte Williams. You do have eventually Jawan Jennings. I think the receiving core as a whole is pretty good without having the lead singer at the top. but it's just a good group overall. So the way that this all played itself out, I think Worthy, Hunter, Waddle, you can make a case that all three of those guys could be round 4 or round 5 picks, certainly round 5 picks, because that's what their average draft position is telling us. So I don't hate it. I just don't think that you ideally want to come out of the first 3 rounds without one wide receiver. But based on the build, getting Chase Brown in round 2, getting George Kittle in round 3, if you wanted to have one of those top-tier tight ends, it worked out okay, in my opinion, based on how this group of receivers was put together.
It could have been different receivers, too. If you don't love these names, that could have been Garrett Wilson instead of Xavier Worthy, or Marvin Harrison or DK Metcalf instead of Worthy. It could have been McLaurin or DJ Moore or McMillan instead of Travis Hunter. It could have been Jerry Jeudy or Zay Flowers instead of Jalen Waddle. All right, let's take a look at position 6 here, Heath, and how this team that took Ashton Genty, by the way, 4 running backs ahead of Saquon Barkley. Bijan, Gibbs, Achane, Genty, and then Barkley was the next pick. But Genty, Trey McBride, a little earlier than we're used to seeing, 1 pick after Brock Bowers, Jaden Daniels. So how did this team do taking running back, tight end, quarterback? That was the only team that took a tight end and a quarterback with 2 of its first 3 picks.
So when I do go not quite 0 wide receiver, but close to it, this is usually what my teams look more like. Taking a Trey McBride or a Brock Bowers in round 2, taking a Jaden Daniels or a Lamar Jackson in round 3. I think he has a top 6 running back and maybe another top 12 running back, but if not, a very good number 2 in Breece Hall. I'm a little bit more optimistic about Terry McLaurin. I think Calvin Ridley's in that blob of guys that we treat as wide receiver 3s, but not that far from the low-end wide receiver 2s. What's really going to kind of tilt this whole thing is Stephon Diggs anywhere close to Stephon Diggs? Does Brandon Ayuk come back and look anything at all like Brandon Ayuk? I think that this can absolutely work because he's elite, really, at quarterback, tight end, RB1, RB2. And so you just need your wide receivers to be fine. There's plenty of risk in this receiving core. But if Terry McLaurin signs his contract and Stephon Diggs looks like Stephon Diggs week 1, this is a very, very, very good team.
It's my least favorite team so far of the ones that we've seen. Just a lot of ifs. I mean, look, Genty, if you want to reach for him, that's fine. I don't like him at number 6 overall. I think there are better players on the board. Jefferson was still available. McCaffrey's still available. I like those guys better than Genty. So first issue there. McBride, Daniels, that's fine. Breece Hall in round 4, if you want to go that route, that's fine. But it's just too many questions. Like Stephon Diggs is a potential flex option for you. I don't like that coming off the knee injury. Brian Robinson, okay, not bad there. But, a lot of just ifs. Brandon Ayuk may not play for the first 6 weeks. Garendo, who knows with his shoulder. And just like too many questions for me with this team.
And that's fair. However, if you take the same build in terms of running back, tight end, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, I do think that you could come up with names that you like better. So you could take Barkley there instead of Genty. You can stick with McBride and Daniels. You could take R.J. Harvey for you, Jamey, ahead of Breece Hall, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you don't like McLaurin. You could have taken Teteroa McMillan there. Let's say you stick with Ridley. You go Ricky Pearsall over Stephon Diggs.
Yep.
All of a sudden, for you, this is a team that you like a lot better, and it shows you that you can get away with this build.
Yeah, this wasn't a question. I'm sorry, it wasn't a question of the build. It was a question of the players. So yes, you're right. The roster construction for me is fine. The players, I just have too many questions for me.
I think both angles of this are worth bringing up. We'll obviously talk about the players as well, but if we learned anything from teams 4 through 6, specifically teams 5 and 6, I believe, it's that if you don't take a wide receiver with any of your first 3 picks or any of your first 4 picks, there is a big group of wide receivers that go all the way deep to about wide receiver 40. They're okay. They're really not bad. You can take advantage of that blob, as we call it. All right, so that's the first half of the draft. We'll take a look at picks 7, 8, and 9. Those 3 teams, how did they do? How did they structure their rosters? What do we like best? We'll tell you after this on FFT. I think it's about time Saquon Barkley be drafted. Wouldn't you guys agree? And he goes 7th overall. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It's Adam, Jamey, and Heath talking about this 12-team PPR mock draft, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex. And so these are picks 7 through 9. These are the first 7 picks for these 3 managers. A surprise there, certainly with Josh Jacobs going 8th. We're not going to tell you to do that. He should maybe be going in that spot in the 2nd round or even a little bit later. But it's going to happen in your drafts, and you have to adjust to surprises. Heath, if I told you that you were picking 7th through 9th, what would your thought be just going into the draft in a 12-team PPR league?
Well, first off, I would think, well, I don't really like that very much. I'd much rather have an early pick or a later pick, but it's perfectly fine. I would be thinking about this could be a bit of a scramble to make sure at the 7th pick that I get one of those top 10 wide receivers. And closer to the 9th pick, I'm thinking I might take 2 of them, which is exactly what happened in this draft.
Jamey, same question to you. You have picks 7 through 9. Your first thought is what?
My first thought is I'm going to try and get a potential receiver if it falls the right way. And again, knowing that there was Justin Jefferson on the board, knowing Saquon Barkley was on the board, knowing Devon Achane, those are usually my 3 targets in those spots. But I think, you kind of just have to play the board, really. There's no real, for me, I'm taking this particular player. Like, I know the range of players that I'm going to be looking at, but I'm not going in with the idea of I'm going to take a specific guy. But I do think you have to consider what's happening in round 2. And do I want to go receiver? Do I want to, take the first run on those running backs, which is really where Josh Jacobs typically goes? Or do you want to buy into, one of the tight ends with Brock Bowers most likely being the first one to come off the board?
And I'm thinking, man, I really hope I get one of these 3 wide receivers, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., and A.J. Brown. Drake London actually went ahead of A.J. Brown in this draft, so that London pick, if you're drafting with us, is usually A.J. Brown. But I'm not super confident I'm going to love the running backs coming back to me in round 2. And if you look at the 3 picks in round 2, obviously none of them are running backs. Derrick Henry's off the board. Jacobs is off the board. He's usually in this range. I'm not opposed to taking Chase Brown there, by the way. Chase Brown went just a little bit after this range. He went with the 8th pick of round 2. But anyway, let's look at these 3 teams. So Heath, taking a look here, do you like any of these builds? Actually, I'm sorry. Can we throw just the 3 teams up again and just kind of look at all 3 of them if possible? Sorry about that, guys. And they're all pretty different. You got a 3 receiver there. You got running back, tight end, receiver. You got running back, wide receiver, quarterback. Very different here. Anything that stands out to you is good or bad?
Yeah, I think that the pick 9 team I like a lot more in a league where I have to start 3 wide receivers with Neighbors, Thomas, and Adams. That's a powerhouse in that format. But my favorite in a 2 wide receiver league would be the Barkley, Bowers, McConkey, Sutton start. I think you've got 2 top 20 wide receivers. You've got an elite running back. You've got my number 1 tight end. And then they did well later than that as well.
Jamey, your favorite of these builds?
I'd like to take a time machine and go back with the Josh Jacobs pick, redo that one. But I do think the start I like the best is the Neighbors, Thomas, Adams start. Looking at it again, it would have been Jefferson in that spot. But taking the 3 receivers, getting it out of the way, getting Joe Burrow. After we get past the quarterback, though, I hate the running back selection. But I think it could have worked out as we could illustrate when we get to that team. But just in terms of these 3 teams, I would agree with Heath. It's the Barkley one.
And if you don't like Aaron Jones and Najee Harris as your RBs 1 and 2, that could have been Pacheco or Joe Mixon or David Montgomery instead of Aaron Jones. And it could have been, really, who else?
No, that's
No, it couldn't have been. The Najee Harris picks, there were not really good running backs. Probably Caleb Johnson would have been the pick there at RB2.
Yeah, I think the problem was in a 2 wide receiver league, I know that you don't want to chase positions, but in this format, if you can only start 2 wide receivers and you see, as you guys have said repeatedly, the running backs went much earlier than you expected in this draft. At some point, you do kind of have to adjust to that, I think. And it doesn't sound like there were a lot. Like, I wouldn't be very happy if Isaiah Pacheco was my number 1 and basically nobody else good to be my number 2. I certainly would have probably tried to take David Montgomery where they took George Pickens at least.
The funny thing, Heath, is that running backs did go early in this draft, but it didn't happen until that Devontae Adams pick. After that, 5 of the next 6 picks were running backs. But when you take 3 wide receivers with your first 3 picks, at some point you're gonna need a running back, and you better hope that it falls to you the right way. Otherwise, you're in trouble here, and that's kind of what happened. to Adam. All right, so now we can take a look at them one by one here, starting with Team 7, which started with Saquon Barkley. Heath, this is the team you said you like the build a lot. Jamey, I'll get your thoughts on this team. How do you feel about Team 7?
Yeah, and a lot will change, mostly for the positive for Rashee Rice, because I think getting him in round 6, you're kind of baking in the suspension anyway. But if you're getting a 3-game suspension for Rice, now you're talking about a receiving core of McConkey, Sutton, and Rice, where all 3 of those guys have top 20 upside. That's amazing to start. To add to the start of Saquon Barkley and Brock Bowers. So Tony Pollard, I think, is a suitable number 2 running back. I think Tyrone Tracy can sort of mix and match once Tyjae Spears comes back and maybe Pollard loses a little bit of value. Dobbins has huge upside. This is such a great team, just in terms of the overall build. And so the one concern would be if you're not a Dak Prescott, Drake May, supporter, you got both those guys, and hopefully one of them can turn into something of significance here. I don't love, the only thing really that concerns me is doubling up on quarterback and tight end. I just don't love doing both of that, but I think the players that they got, huge upside, especially if May hits as a second quarterback and Kincaid hits as a second tight end. So really love a lot about what this roster looks like, and one of my favorite teams.
This is the second or third team that we've seen that drafted a tight end in the first 3 rounds and then drafted a second tight end. And especially with the questionable running back depth on this team, they really should have taken another one of those high upside backup running backs in the double-digit rounds.
I'd have to look, but we were talking about it during the draft last night. I'm not sure any team took their own running back's handcuff. There were handcuff running backs being selected, but I don't know if any team actually took their own. All right, let's take a look at Team 8 here. And Heath, I'll get your thoughts on Team 8, which started with Josh Jacobs, which we definitely was too early, and then Drake London ahead of A.J. Brown, so going off the ADP a little bit, and then Jalen Hurts. All right, here's the team for you. What do you think about with Hurts and Andrews, Jacobs and Montgomery, London, Evans, DJ Moore?
Yeah, again, I'll just say the same thing that I just said about the tight ends, and you took Jalen Hurts in round 3. I'm probably not using that round 12 pick on Caleb Williams because, again, we've got some questions about the running back depth. Caleb Johnson's a good number 3 running back, and I think round 8's a good value for him. But you're not confident that Montgomery's necessarily going to be an RB2, and Caleb Johnson's got some question marks. I would have liked to have seen some more backup running backs on the bench. The wide receiver core is absolutely fantastic. We love that. And I think Mark Andrews in round 9 is a pretty good value. So not a bad job. I probably would have taken a running back where they took Caleb Johnson if I used 3 of my first 5 picks on wide receivers in a league where I can only start 2 of them. But still, a solid job other than the fact that we don't like the order some of these guys were taking.
This is like we discussed this on a podcast, and Adam shut it down quickly because we were doing something else. But this would be like if you traded your first-round pick to get additional second- or third-round picks. There's no real first-round pick on this team, but there's a lot of good players that still sort of worked itself out. So I just don't love Jacobs in round 1. I don't think you got a top 12 player. Could still work out that way, and Drake London, same thing. Just don't love the way that it started.
All right, Team 9. This is the 3-receiver team. Did not take a running back until round 5. That's about as 0 RB as you get these days. Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Devontae Adams, Joe Burrows at quarterback, Evan Ingram's at tight end, and then the running backs, Aaron Jones, Najee Harris. This poor soul, he just did not get any good running back value where he took Najee Harris in round 7. Again, the other running backs available at that point, Ramondre Stevenson, Zach Charbonnet, Caleb Johnson, Brian Robinson, Travis Etienne, Jordan Mason. So it just didn't really fall his way. He does have Jaden Blue. Jamey, you do like this team, though? I think you said that earlier. No,
I like the start, and I think the roster construction and the build could have been fantastic. Again, you look at, forget about Neighbors, right? So let's just say it's Justin Jefferson, but even his Neighbors, right? So it's your Neighbors, Thomas, Adams, those are 3 top 15 caliber wide receivers. They're 2 potential top 8 guys when you have Neighbors and Thomas. Joe Burrow is obviously going to be in the mix to be a top 3, top 5 quarterback, depending on how you look at him. And then it just starts to fall apart from there, just unfortunately with how the running backs were. I love George Pickens, but it's a luxury pick that you didn't really weren't able to afford because of how the draft started for you. So like you said, getting David Montgomery there would have made more sense. I like Pickens better than David Montgomery in theory, especially in PPR, but I don't think it worked for you. So if you would have gone, let's just say you like Jones, Montgomery, and then somebody else besides Najee Harris, because we don't know when he's going to be ready to play, and obviously he's in a secondary role. Like, that would have been such a better trio there. And then I really like the back half of it, because Charbonnet's got huge upside, Jaden Blue huge upside, Ray Davis huge upside. Like, those are smart picks for the way that your roster build is, but I just don't think that you got the best 2 running backs to start the season with, and that's the big concern for me.
Well, if you've been paying attention, we've gone through 9 teams, and we have not said Justin Jefferson's name yet. So when we take this break and come back, we will say Justin Jefferson's name. We say it 3 times, so it'll appear on the show. We'll be right back with teams 10 through 12 on FFT after this. A lot of people don't like having a late pick, but we're going to show you that it can absolutely work, especially that wide receiver value at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. Let's take a look at teams 10 through 12. Full PPR draft, start 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and only 1 flex. So, Heath, the first thing I noticed when I look at this beautiful color-coded draft board, combined in the first 7 rounds for these 3 teams, we have 1 quarterback, 0 tight ends. Do you think that's something that we should expect for the last 3 picks to not have Bowers, McBride, Kittle, or really any of the top 5 quarterbacks?
Well, I think I'm the only person here that's willing to take Brock Bowers early in round 2. And so if you're not, then yes, because I mean, Trey McBride pretty much never gets to the end of round 3 in our drafts. And I think we're going to get to the point of these George Kittle reports being so positive, with Juwan Jennings still being hurt, with Brandon Ayuk being out till week 6. I don't think George Kittle is going to make it to this range very much. And so really the first 5 rounds, there may not be much of an opportunity to draft a tight end at this point. You're not going to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks likely at this point. And so maybe you see a Jalen Hurts or a Joe Burrow in this range on occasion. But yeah, I do think that it's kind of typical that there are less elite tight ends and quarterbacks available to you at the back end of the draft.
Jamey, obviously Jacoby Myers is one that stands out, probably went a little bit too early there, going ahead of Jameson Williams. But you look at these builds here, and do you think it was better to go 3 running backs with your first 4 picks and have St. Brown, McMillan, Mahomes, Pearsall, like team 10, or teams 11 and 12 went 2 running backs with their first 2 picks? Do you have a preference? Sorry. First 4 picks. Team 10 goes 3 running backs with their first 4 picks. Teams 11 and 12, 2 running backs with their first 4 picks. Do you have a preference?
In this format, I think it can go either way. I really like what Team 12 did, though. Just looking at the mixing and matching of, Henry and Nico, JSN, and then Hampton and Pacheco, just how that worked out. I just like all those combination of players in those spots, like James Cook now falling to round 4, Alvin Kamara maybe reaching round 3. Fine to go 2 and 2 that way, and even McCaffrey, St. Brown, and then the 2 running backs. But once you get to that second wide receiver spot, it just looks a little bit questionable. So I do think getting 2 of the receivers in the first 3 rounds worked out a little bit better for Team 11 and Team 12.
All right, let's look at these teams individually here. Heath, I'll give you Team 10, which started with Christian McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown, then Ken Walker, Travion Henderson, Tedero McMillan, and Patrick Mahomes. And the tight end on this team, they have both Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland.
I mean, you want to talk about, sometimes when we're doing our live streams, I say, I'm just going to draft the most exciting team that I can so that all the people watching like my team. This is an exceptionally exciting team. You've got Christian McCaffrey, who might be the most valuable player in fantasy. Amon-Ra St. Brown's been awesome. Ken Walker and Travion Henderson, you might have 3 top 15 running backs there. And then Tedero McMillan. I love the upside of this team, the tight ends. Again, upside. Warren and Loveland. I might have done something different with some of those bench spots, but absolutely love the upside this team drafted.
Let's give Jamey Team 11 here and see how he's feeling about this squad, which got Justin Jefferson and then Puka Nacua. Not a bad start in a PPR league.
Absolute gift, and looking at, hopefully Puka's going to be fine, but to take him in round 2, fine because of Matthew Stafford, Hopefully Stafford's okay, but to get him in round 2 is just an absolute steal. Look, Kamara and Cook, you flip them. Maybe people like it that way. You're still getting 2, potential running backs that should be great. Joe Mixon, you're going to love. Adam, that value in round 6, I think that's probably appropriate for him, maybe on the high end at this point. Like you said, the Jacoby Myers pick was a little bit of a reach. Debo Samuel may end up being a steal, depending on how this goes for Terry McLaurin and the holdout there. And I love the value for David Njoku. So it's a solid squad. And obviously, again, when you get a gift like Justin Jefferson at 11, I don't think we're going to see that in any other draft that we do.
All right, and let's take a look at Team 12. Any gifts for Team 12? Nico Collins, Derrick Henry. This team could have been Nico Collins and Puka Nacua, and then like Omarion Hampton and James Cook. But, whatever, it is what it is. You don't know who's going to be there when you're making your first two picks. Heath, do you like the build for this team?
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about waiting on tight end. Is this the only team that waited all the way until the last pick, and it turned out to be the last pick of this draft and still got Dallas Goedert? I might have taken two tight ends there at the end. I like the combination of pairing up Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson in the double-digit rounds. So I think there's a lot of upside at the top. I'm not the biggest Isaiah Pacheco fan, but this is a good round to take him. Love Ibuka. I like this team a lot.
All right. Thank you all so much. If you participated in the draft, we really appreciate it. If you were with us last night for the live stream, that was a lot of fun as well. We want your questions. So our next segment will be all about you or answering your questions. Ask FFT when we come back. Time for your questions. Here's what's on your mind. Zach wants to know why Cooper Kupp is available after pick 100. Why is he being so undervalued, guys? Heath, this is a great one for you. You like Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I think it's a bad one for me because I have no idea why he's available so late. No, it's because he's 32 years old and he got hurt last year, and people are scared that this is the end.
Yeah, we have him at 91 in our ADP, so I would not go into your draft thinking you can get Kupp after pick 100, but you can get him fairly late. Now let's see our next question here. It is from a lot of numbers in that name, man. Is it crazy to take Burrow at 3 in a 10-team superflex? I feel like Lamar is going to regress to the mean. I'm not a fan of second-year quarterbacks. I'll take Allen, but if not JB, then Chase. Like if not Burrow, then Chase. So he wants to take Burrow over Lamar Jackson, basically. Your thoughts, Jamey?
I mean, I wouldn't do that, but, Burrow is coming off an amazing season. We've talked about this. Like, he's, probably the best candidate to throw for 5,000 yards of the quarterbacks right now, and receiving core is locked in. So if you have that belief, then do it. But I would still take Lamar Jackson, or maybe trade down, see if you can move down and pick up a draft pick someplace else.
Yeah, especially if it's a 4-point per passing touchdown league, you don't want to be taking Burrow over Jackson. All right, next question. 10-team half PPR league, do you value taking an early quarterback or tight end, or maybe both, for the positional advantage with more players available in the 10-team versus 12-team league? Heath?
100% yes. The fewer running backs, wide receivers that are going to be started in a given league, so 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, no flex leagues, or 10-team or 8-team leagues, the more I'm going to prioritize having an elite quarterback or tight end.
And maybe both if it falls that way. We'll see if we have one more question we can answer here. My league awards, these bonus points for 50-yard touchdowns. Which wide receivers are good for touchdown bombs?
Jamison Williams, Xavier Worthy. I think George Pickens will fall into that.
We got time for one more. Let's get one more question in there. Heath, you can have this one. What is Travis Hunter's value in Yahoo leagues that have IDP spots?
If you can count his defensive and offensive points both, then he's a surefire top 20 wide receiver.
Take round 3, maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that. All right. Well, that is it for Fantasy Football Today. If you enjoyed the show, please check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. A lot of thank yous to give out, but of course to Jamey Eisenberg and Heath Cummings, and for all of you who watch and listen to today's show. I'm Adam Aizer. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next time on Fantasy Football Today.